just fine. Well, welcome to our podcast as what we call it, Marquee
Shotgun Wisdom.
Shotgun Wisdom. Great. So, you want to talk a little bit about how we came up with the name? Oh, first, introduce yourself.
My name is Maddie Newman, and this is my dad.
You don't need to
This is our
introduce me, but
podcast.
hey, I am Mark Newman, Madison's dad, and we decided we're going to take a crazy journey down this road of doing a podcast. So, talk a little bit about what the podcast is about and how it all started, where the idea came from, and I could expound a little bit of what you say.
Well, the idea came from just our everyday life, our everyday conversations, mostly that take place in the car. So that's where the shotgun wisdom part comes from. And then the Marky part is what I call my dad. And why we decided to do it was, I think, as a time capsule for ourselves, but also to bring a conversation to other families like ours and open up a dialogue. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we've been talking about doing this for about the last 6 months. And obviously during school, it was a little challenging to get it done during that time frame. But the idea was about just talking a little bit about all the conversations that we've had over the years by just ever since you were 5 years old, driving in the car and you could actually have a conversation, would drive from picking you up from daycare, well, way before we started. Well, back, we could go as far back as daycare.
Yeah.
When you could hardly speak, but you'd make sounds. But we always interact in the car. And later on, when you started speaking and around five.
Yeah, like on the way to dance after
around,
elementary school.
exactly, when you were around 5 years old, I'd pick you up and take you to dance classes and all the different extracurriculum activity you had, whether it was soccer. And we started having these dialogues in the car. And so that's where it all started. And funny enough, you're almost 18 years old, but we still have those kind of conversation at a much higher level right now. So that's kind of the idea behind the podcast. How do we take all that stuff that we had discussed and talked about over the years and kind of give people a peek behind the curtain so they could see and hear some of the type of level of conversations that would have just from daughter to dad, dad to daughter. I want you to go back a little bit and talk more about the actual name of the podcast, because you mentioned it a little bit a while ago about we named it Marky.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was my idea to name it Marky, but then the tagline actually came from you. And you want to tell the folks a little bit about where Shotgun Wisdom came from?
Well, shotgun wisdom, I think, just encapsulates like what our car rides mean and what they result in, because it's just my dad bestowing his wisdom from life experience and his knowledge just from his long life
Are you calling me old?
to mine. So just anything like I have like about my personal life or like about things going on in the world or around me, things that I have questions about. So yeah, shotgun wisdom.
Yeah, and the Marky part actually I want to talk about because the name obviously is my name, but
Well, your name isn't Marky.
no, but it's actually stemmed from Mark.
Yeah.
When you were, I would say, about 3 years old.
Yeah, like 3. Like
Yeah,
when
between
I could
2 and
talk.
3.
I think like 2, maybe 2.
Yeah, you spend a lot of time for your first. You want to talk about the first 2 years of your life a little bit?
So my mom took me to Slovakia when I was like really young for about like 9 months or 6 months.
Well, you had 2 trips.
Yeah.
The first one, when you were 3 months, you went for like 8 months.
Yeah.
And then you came back for about maybe 3 months, and then you went back, and you didn't get back until your second birthday.
Yeah, two extended trips to Slovakia. So I didn't see my dad for a while. And when I came back, I wasn't like speaking English. Well, really wasn't speaking anything, but I wasn't hearing English around me. So I heard everyone calling my dad Mark. So I'm like, well, that's Mark. So then I just called you Mark. And then that eventually warped into Marky. I don't even know how that happened, but it did. And it just stuck because I just never felt like obviously when I referred, like if I'm talking to you, I mean, talking about you to someone, I would say my dad, but like Marky is your name to me.
Yeah, and the reason why it stuck with me was basically because I remember the first time I heard you actually formulate speech where
Mm-hmm.
it made actual sense was, like at the house we lived in at the time. Typically, it was upstairs, it was the living room area,
Yeah.
and then I'd have to go downstairs to get out the house. And whenever I would leave the house, you would come to the top of the stairs, or when I get home, you'd be at the top of the stairs. And this particular morning, I was leaving the house, and I looked back just to wave at you, and you go, Mark. I was like, whoa, she said my name.
Yeah.
And ever since that, it was like the first word you spoke and it meant something. So it always resonated with me. And so from that point on, it was always Mark, Mark.
Did you ever wish I called you dad? Like the first couple of times were you like trying to push it or you just never really? Because I know like after I was saying it for a while, you never wanted me to like go back. But like the first couple of times, like were you guys like, oh, dad or whatever?
No, it never mattered to me at all because I think what mattered more was the fact that you were able to formulate
Mm-hmm.
a word, and the first word you were able to say, at least around us that we were aware of, was Mark. And I
Yeah.
was like, that moment created that bond between, oh, me and you. And it was because you never said mommy or daddy, it
Yeah.
was just Mark. So for me, it was like, hey, I ran with it and it never mattered to me because I was never one of those particular parents about, well, you should call me dad. I know I'm your
Yeah.
dad. So it's not like I remember you try that with your mom later on.
Crickets.
You want to talk about what happened when you said that?
My mom is not in with that. Like she's very, you call her mom, mama, whatever. I didn't call her mom. Then I called her like mama or mommy. And I think I said it like once. It was only one time because it didn't
Oh yeah,
have do that.
I remember you said Anna, and you're like,
And she
she
was
was
like,
like, don't call me that, and it was like it
oh,
got shut down from that
yeah,
point on. You
no.
never tried it again.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So you want one of the questions that we quite often what initiate conversations while we are in the car was always the fact that whenever you're in the back seat staring out a window, and it doesn't matter where we were going or what you were seeing outside, it was always a conversation always started from a curiosity. And the way you always started the conversation as a little kid was by getting my attention. And you'd always say, Marky.
Mhm.
And it would always start by Marky, whether it's a man walking on the side of the street that you found curious or something, or it was a neighborhood, you'd be like, Marky, why is that man walking like that? And I always say, try to turn around or even acknowledge you and just try to have a conversations with you.
Yeah.
And so even today, as a 18-year-old,
Oh my gosh. You keep saying 18. My birthday's in January. So
well,
I am 17, very much so
the
17.
way I figure it, once you pass your 17th birthday, you're almost at 18th birthday. So even as an 18 or 17-year-old kid, adolescent, we still have these conversations, no longer with you in the back seat,
Mm.
but more or less with you in the front seat. And you want to talk a little bit more about what goes through your mind when you're trying to initiate those kind of conversations.
Okay, well, number one, like I think before it used like as a kid when you're, first discovering like consciousness, like just looking at the window and like making observation. But now I'll like think about something like 2 days before we're in the car or a day before we're in the car and I'll be like, oh, like I want to bring that up to my dad or whatever. Or even when I'm in like, so that downtime in the car like helps me like start to like remember like, oh, I wanted to ask you about this one thing, or just like my nature of just like having that time to think and like stare at the window and be like, oh, well, I wonder why like this is the way that that is. And then I'll just like ask you about it because we have the opportunity. But yeah, so that's basically.
Because even some of the much heavier subject matters that, whether it's a question or a discussion you wanted to have, it always started with the same kind of initiation of you
Mhm.
trying to get my attention. And it was never anything like, you know, any discomfort on your part.
Yeah.
It was always just like marking. It always came from a place of curiosity.
Yeah. And I remember like there was a period of time there where you were like, why do you always say my name? Like, because we'll just be sitting there and it's like, okay, sometimes I need to get your attention, but sometimes I'm just like right next to you and you're like, why don't you just like say what you want to say? Like, why do you have Marky? But like, that's just like how that's just how I do it. So I'm not gonna like, now you don't say anything, but there was like a whole time where you're like, just say what you want to ask. But yeah, like one of the things that I think, got us to that point is that you would never like dismiss me, which I know a lot of the time it's easy for adults. Like, obviously, you have your own like things that you're thinking about, and like you're trying to get from point A to point B. And like a little kid is just like asking you some like question. It's like, okay, well, whatever. Like, just dismiss them. Like my mom does, loves to do that. Like, she'll just like redirect or whatever. But you're always like, oh, tell me more, like answer my question. And then I have another question. And so then it just like snowballs into like this bigger discussion or debate or whatever.
Yeah, because one of the things is that I was very cognizant of is that when you try to have any kind of dialogue with me, whether it was out of curiosity or it was out of concern, or quite often it was times where it might have something to do with you personally,
Mm-hmm.
and you were just not only just curious about it, but you wanted to have some kind of answer. You were trying to find some kind of clarity, or you might have heard other kids talk about certain things, and you're like, huh. And one of the things that I've always been conscious about was whenever you try to have a conversation with me, it was always to be open enough to address any topic, subject matter. Because it was never, for me, it was never about, making the situation uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know as a kid, struggling to find your way or navigating your way through life, you have all these different things in your head, just like whether you heard it from someone or whether you were like, you saw it somewhere, or, it could be a curse word. And I remember having conversation with you about people just saying things and you're like, why did they say that? And even as trivial as it might be, as someone calling someone the B word,
Yeah.
and it was just like trying to get you to a point to understand from a mature adult perspective, as well as, okay, you're a kid, but you're not a dumb kid.
Yeah.
You're not the kind of kid where you're like, well, the birds and the bees and the this and the that. And it's just like just using all these euphemisms that
Yeah,
makes
but
no
that's what
sense.
I mean. Like, you never use euphemisms. Like, there was never a point where I was like too young to like learn about something or too young to like ask you something. Like, whereas like I definitely know that there's some things that I like asked my mom or like said to my mom where she's like, oh, like whatever, like one day something, like one day. What? It's always like in this like future tense, but like you've never like turned me away or like try to like not talk about something. You've made find a way to make it obviously like age appropriate, but also like not treat me like I'm, like not capable of understanding. Because at the same, like, as much as like parents want to, shield their kid from like discussing certain topics, if your kid is already at the point where they're thinking about it enough to like say something to you, then like you've already, like, it's time to cross that bridge, in my opinion, at least. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if a kid is already like pondering it, like, what's the point of like suppress? I feel like that just makes the kid more curious, because it's like, okay, well,
Yeah, and quite often you see parents try to, navigate difficult subject matter, and the way they talk about it, they
Yeah,
talk
it's
about it.
uncomfortable, but it's like you make it worse. Like you're like,
Yeah, and the kid walk away going, "What?"
yeah,
And they're even more confused by talking to their parents about certain things than they
yeah,
had before they even initiate the conversation. So, um, we are going to address a lot of subject matters that you and I have had discussions about over the years. Some of it, clearly are uncomfortable conversations to have with any kid, teenager, but that's all a part of the whole growth process
yeah,
and maturity and understanding. And so the whole idea behind this whole podcast was it's not that it's a perfect, nobody have the perfect answer of how
yeah.
you raise kids, how you relate to your parents, and how does your parents relate to the kids, whether they're a toddler or, or they're in a car seat or they're actually teenagers.
Mhm.
There's just different phases that kids go through. But the bottom line is for parents and kids to have a kind of communication pipeline and a process of how they actually interact and not only answer these questions, but let the kid feel comfortable enough to be able to bring their curious mind to have these kind of conversation. And there's one thing that I've always said to you, which is what?
Knowledge is power.
Not only that, I always say to you that I want you to always have a curious mind. Because me as a kid growing up, one of the things that I remember distinctly about me was I was always curious about things. It doesn't matter what it was. And the era in which I grew up, when you're curious, it was you're too inquisitive.
Yeah,
You're in grown people's business. When you get
yeah,
well, your parents, or I mean, obviously, I didn't really grow up in that kind of environment where I had the kind of parents that just run to and ask questions. But
mhm.
in the situations that I found myself as a kid, you were always dismissed, like
Yeah,
you're in grown people's business, or you have no business having those kind of things, thoughts in your head. And so, not that anything that we do or how we communicate with each other is perfect, but it had the kind of situation that worked for both of us and got us to this point where I like to think about our relationship. You might want to talk a little bit more about the relationship that you and I have had.
yeah. So, I mean, like many people have noticed, like, oh, like you're always in the car with your dad. Like even Sierra, one of my PT that lives in my building. Now I moved, but she was like, Why are you guys always like just sitting there with the car running?" Like, and my mom, like, she'll come like, "When are you guys having your discussions or whatever?" Like, so people are always puzzled, but it's like this has been going on. And another thing about, like making your kid like encouraging conversation is that I know that no matter like what time, like I've called you multiple times, like at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock or whatever, and you just come and like we just talk about like stuff, and like sometimes it turns into like an emotional discussion about stuff that I've been thinking about or going through, and then sometimes it's just like things that I've been thinking. Like I remember like, oh my gosh, like so distinctly this one time where I called you, and I don't even know how old I was, but I was young, and I was like having a racial like identity crisis. I'm like, I don't look like mixed people. Like I'm like looking at Zendaya or something like, and you're like, what does a mixed person look like? Like, what are you talking about? And then I just have like whatever, all these epiphanies that are like set off by whatever you tell me, or like things that and then I remember that, and then it, you know, changes my outlook on things. So just having that kind of relationship where like, you know, you can, I don't know how else to say it, but talk me off the ledge. Like, even though it doesn't always have to be that like dramatic, but just talk me off of whatever like thought spiral, whatever's like stressing me out. Like, especially right now, like a lot of that happens to be dealing with like college and what I'm gonna end up like studying and like what I'm gonna end up doing, and like, my perception of what that's going to look like, which is often filled with misconceptions, as I know, or
Distortions.
distortions, where you're like, that's not how that works. But like, how am I supposed to, or how is any like young kid supposed to like know that without asking about it? Because like your perception of what like adulthood, or what like early adulthood is going to look like, or college or anything like that, is like so not what you think it's going to be. So I think asking like someone like a
Yeah,
parent.
and I think that is the big point here to be made, is that you know parents, the way we see things and our whole experience from growing up by going through these different pathways, these different experiences or milestones, we have encountered a lot of those resistance or a lot of those thoughts or a lot of those obstacles that you kids now are finding yourself having to navigate around. But the thing that as a parent or as parents or grown-ups, we don't really stop to think when we're relating to our kids to know that, hey, we were there. We had those thoughts in our head. Our questions were just answered in different ways because
Yeah.
back then we
And you
had
had to learn
different,
the hard way.
yeah, which is kind of, difficult to come out on the other side of it unscathed, because learning the hard way is meaning you went through it, good or bad. You either succeed or you failed, but you still had to go through it. And so, even just to go back to the whole car thing, is that what we do a lot is drive by moments or driveway moments, so to
Yeah.
speak. But
Drive by.
not drive by. You don't want to do drive by unless you're doing like a drive by, which I usually say to myself, all right, I'm leaving the house. I'm going to have to do a drive by and
Yeah.
pick up Maddie and kind of have some conversations. But I think more importantly, just to give people a little bit more understanding from our family dynamic, is that your mom and I divorced when you were like 5 years old.
Yeah.
So we have joint custody. So you live in two households.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just having people understand when you had to go,
Yeah.
you called me to go. It's
Yeah.
not like
It's
I
like,
was on
where
a
is she?
mission somewhere. I,
Also,
I never came home or anything.
this is not like the topic, but like it's great. Like I always like think it's so hilarious when people are like, I don't really get it that much anymore because I think it's like so common now. But I remember when I was younger, I would tell people like, "Oh, I have joint custody like with both of my parents. Like I see both of you guys like all the time." And people would be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Like, "Oh my gosh, like what do you mean?" I think it's great. That's like not something that the only thing that's annoying about it is that like my stuff is in two different places and I have to like move it around, but that's like the only part that I plus you guys live like 5-10 minutes away from each other, so that helps too. Like I know it would be more difficult if you live far away, but it's like yeah.
Well, and again, I'm sure we have had these discussions before, so you understand it from other people's perspective, is that when a marriage get dissolved,
I know, like not everyone's situation is the same, but that's also like my point is like don't
yeah,
assume that everyone is like going through like I don't even remember this whole
yeah,
like
because you were so young
yeah,
at
I
the
was so
time.
young. But I
Yeah,
feel like but so many people like that is their experience that they are so young. Like I don't know. I'm just saying I think it's bold for people to assume that like most divorce if children of divorced households are like going through it, like they're like
yeah,
in the
because the whole
trenches.
American construct about marriage and raising children, it's always about
Yeah.
having,
The
the
nuclear
nuclear family
family.
where you have the mom and the dad, you live in the
Yeah.
same household, and that never changed because that's always in the best interest to having a good, typical, stereotypical family, which I think that notion had died a long time ago because being a father doesn't matter what construct you find yourself in as far as a familial construct.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, if you're a dad and you love your child, and you're going to do anything and everything for your child, regardless.
Yeah.
The only difference with separation is just proximity in terms of geography. That makes it difficult
Yeah.
because, God forbid, I was living in a different city, different
Yeah,
state.
but you guys have made it a point to stay very close to
Yes,
each other. So,
exactly. Because
yeah.
to me, your well being and your existence was more important than anything else. So it was about, okay, we're not going to get along. We're not going to live together. We're not going to be together. But
And that's okay.
this child, I'm going to have to, I want to, and I'm going to have to play a very important role in her life on a daily basis. And so, obviously, that this particular episode was never to really dive too deep into the whole marriage and divorce and
Yeah.
child custody situation, but obviously it's something that it's going to thread itself throughout every conversations that we have because that's pretty much our life and our existence. So we take it back, circle back to the driveway moments because quite often I did most of the pick up and drop off, whether it's from school or whether it's from taking you to dance or any extracurriculum activity that you have. So quite often when it's your mom's night for you to be at your mom's,
Yeah.
I would take you there.
A lot of driving.
And that's where we get stuck, not stuck, but we get into long, deep conversation on the way to your mom's house. And so by the time we get to your mom's house, those conversations can
go on.
They get to, it's so in depth because I will never find myself leaving you with those curiosity because it was always one thread or one morsel, meaning a question can turn into a whole thread of long discussions. And so we'll sit in the car and we'll have in these very spirited debates. Sometimes it was just, oh, you answer one part and that leads to another thing. And so that's where we ended up having these long conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving forward, as we get deeper and deeper into this whole podcast, I just wanted to give people a little flavor of what it's about, what's the idea behind it, and what's the whole approach to us having to us having this conversation. It's definitely about just talking about how we have engaged with each other, have these long conversations, and ended up where we are today. And from a standpoint, from your perspective as the daughter, the child, the teenager, how do you actually see us navigating through these conversations where we can recall and talk about the subject matters that essentially all we're doing is just reliving the conversations.
Yeah, like rehashing kind of.
Yeah, the things that we've talked about in the past.
I mean, I think it's gonna be like, wait, what is the question? Like, how do I see it happening, or how do I?
Yeah, because what we're trying to do is for people who are tuning in and listening to us.
Yeah, get a taste of the Shotgun Newman experience.
Yeah, there's a level of authenticity to the conversations that we're having. It's not a fabricated kind of, we're not trying to juxtapose, father-son relationship, father-daughter relationship based purely on a way to commoditize our relationship. What we're trying to do is saying, okay, these are different subject matters that we had difficult conversations about. Yeah. Whether it was about sports, religion, your racial identity, all those different things. These are subject matters that you and I approached and had very in-depth discussions about. And so that's what we're trying to recapture and try to articulate in a way where people can understand and get a peek behind the curtain to see how we did it. Yeah. And how we came out on the other end of it, and get my perspective as an adult father and your perspective as a daughter, and how we were able to do it. So moving forward, what are some of the things that you see us rehashing and talking about?
I think definitely like girlhood, girl dad specific like milestones, because we recently talked about how like I perceive childhood as a girl or not childhood, parenthood as a parent is different for raising girls versus raising guys. Versus, like, obviously I've never done it, but just out of perception, like I just can't like put myself in that other like perspective, and you've raised a son. So,
Yeah.
so
So,
that,
yeah, we look forward to having these discussions and definitely being able to, distribute it to the masses so they could see and get to engage with us and just to see how we were able to navigate those difficult moments.
and
Or,
also like age gap, like your perception of current events versus mine, or like what is current events for you versus what is current events for me, because I'll ask you about certain things, but you're like, a lot of stuff that like my generation is like into, because you
hey, I'm
keep
still
up.
alive. I
I
still have
know,
a
but I'm
pulse.
saying you keep up with it on purpose, like you purposefully like
Well, I would have to say I don't intentionally go after certain things to understand it, but because I have a curious mind, it doesn't matter what it is. I'm constantly trying to. I've always said to you before, one of my biggest skill set is I'm an information junkie,
mm-hmm.
and one of my biggest detriment is I'm an information junkie. So
Yeah.
I just absorb a lot of information.
So that's what I'm saying. Like there's some overlap versus sometimes when I'm talking to other adults, like they're not as into the times or whatever, like as you.
Yeah,
So
and I spend most of my life around you.
okay, yeah, but like so do other parents. But like,
Yeah,
I think also I rub off because I like tell you stuff and then you like are like, oh.
yeah. I mean, even though I disagree with a lot of positions
Like
that you
when I
take on.
told you the other day that people don't listen to the radio anymore, and you were like,
No, I do understand that people do, and I do believe people don't listen to the radio anymore. But what I would say is, I might disagree that people don't listen to the radio, because when you say radio, I think you're referring to maybe news. But people listen to music constantly on the radio
yeah,
in the
but people
car.
listen to their own procured playlists from like Spotify and
Oh,
stuff,
that's true.
CarPlay.
Oh, I could see that.
Yeah.
But what is radio?
I'm saying like traditional, like back in the day when you would like, no, well, not really back in the day, but even when I was like a kid, like my mom would like turn on like the radio, like 91 point, whatever music station that you were, or Kiss Country if you were into that. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but now like I don't get in any of my friends' cars and like they're like, oh, let's listen to some radio. Like they put on their like little Spotify playlist or whatever.
Okay. So that's the kind of thing
Yeah,
where
like
you have
stuff
to
like that.
kind of parse the nuance between when you say radio, because when people think of radio, now you're using more radio as a euphemism for
But even
a
like talk
source,
radio.
a source, or a mechanical source of how
Yeah.
do you get music. Because when you listen to a station that play music constantly, it's no different than Spotify.
No, it is different.
How
You
so?
Because radio music, okay, stations on the radio push like very like you haven't heard like the term like, oh, that's radio music, like that's
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah. I mean, they have these things on loop where
yeah,
they play the same
versus
songs.
like people like going on their Spotify and playing like their like
But is there a
set.
distinction because the people who are playing stuff on Spotify, they're playing the same stuff in a loop. They have their favorite song. There's
I
no discovery here. They're just playing the same.
really, Spotify is a lot of discovery, I think.
But the brain doesn't have the capacity to consume music in a short period of time with such diversity. I think you like what you like because people stick to listen to music purely based upon that dopamine hit that they're trying to get. And once you find that music that makes you feel good, it's
Okay,
pretty much your
yes
go-to
and but
music.
yes and no. Like some people are like that. Like I'm very much like I could listen to the same song for like 2 weeks and I'll be fine. But like there's some people I know who like they're constantly discovering, or like the genres will just like switch and they have multiple playlists and all that
But that's
stuff.
what I'm saying. If for a person, and if you're taking music in terms of radio, I'm talking more about in the context of mobility when someone's driving in their car.
Yeah.
People don't sit in their car and try to just sit there and discover new music because you just can't. You're driving for the most
Well,
part.
you can put
You put
Spotify like whatever those things are. Like you, there's like things on Spotify you can click, like Spotify Discover or whatever.
So, but then
Or
there
like it'll
goes,
like shuffle or whatever.
but then there lies the same thing that you're running away from, an aggregation of music, because radio is aggregating the music so you could hear it. Spotify, you're telling them to use their algorithm to aggregate some music so you could listen to it, and which is no different from radio, music
But radio will loop like what's trending.
So is Discovery, because there are certain
No, but people
stations.
discover like on Spotify, people discover like old like bands and stuff, or like older music.
Oh, well,
It's like, oh,
see,
the classics.
this is what we do. We get into very deep discussions about a subject matters, and we could just do this all day long. So this is kind of a taste of what we have in store in terms of how we have these thought-provoking conversations and very in-depth conversations, and it doesn't matter what we're talking about, but we're going to curate it in a way where it makes sense and package it so it's relatable to other people and they could actually digest it instead of just going off on a random different tangent.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Miss Madison Newman, I want to thank you
Thank
for
you.
taking this journey with me and allowing me to be a part of this idea that you had for a very long time to bring it to fruition. And I think we will have some good time doing it. So, until next time, you want to say bye to the people?
Bye.
Keep it locked in. We're coming. Stay tuned.
Okay, bye.
You look mortified.